Namaskar students, today we'll be moving into lecture 22, Theories of IR, as we have started the liberal school. Last lecture, we will now be moving into what we call neoliberalism, which is how liberalism today has come back in the post-Cold War period, and what are the types of liberalism that we have in international relations theory. This is one of the most prominent schools and it is extremely important that we get. So in post-war liberalism, we have four main strands of thinking. Two at a systemic level, that is interdependent liberalism and institutional liberalism. And two operate at the level of the nation state, that is sociological liberalism and republican liberalism. The first, what are the basic liberal assumptions? Why do we place all this thinking under liberalism? Closely associated with the rise of the modern nation state. All of us know, we did in our last lecture about classical liberalism and utopianism. We spoke about John Locke, 1632 to 1704, of social contractualists, his principle of life, liberty and property. Then we had Jeremy Bentham, 1748 to 1832, the greatest happiness of the greatest number, utilitarianism, liberal states respect international law. Then we had Immanuel Kant, 1724 to 1804, that republics will establish perpetual peace. Then we had John Stuart Mill, 1806 to 1873, majority rule is not democracy, enlightened self-interest. So the focus, if we see, is on freedom, cooperation, peace and progress. These are the ideas that the liberals stress upon. All saw a great potential for human progress in modern civil society and the capitalist economy, both of which could flourish in states which guaranteed individual liberty. Modernity projects a new and better life, free of authoritarian government and with a higher level of material welfare. Modernization is a very important concept that encompasses the liberal school. The process of modernization unleashed the scientific revolution, led to improved technologies and thus more efficient war producing goods and mastering of nature, great faith in human reason and rationality. Belief in progress. The modern liberal state with its political and economic system must bring about a positive view of human nature. Individuals share many interests and can engage in collaborative and cooperative social action, results greater benefits of all. Then belief in human reason can triumph over human fear and the lust for power. Modernization constantly increases the scope and the need of cooperation in the international system. How much progress? Social and political along with scientific and technological. Inclusive, not exclusive. Progress for liberals means that always also for progress for individuals. Happiness and contentment of individual human beings. Now the questions they usually ask is, what are the limits of progress? Are there any limits? And progress for whom? Robert Keohane says there's a possibility of cumulative progress. End of the Cold War, 9/11 was a speed breaker and today we have COVID-19. Emergence of the modern constitutional state. Now, liberal assumptions, what are their assumptions? Modernization is a process involving all parts in progress in most areas of life. Enlarges the scope of cooperation across international boundaries. Progress means a better life for at least the majority of individuals. Humans possess reason and when applied to international affairs, greater cooperation. Despite anarchy, cooperation possible if common interests are there. Now, sociological liberalism is the first school that we will be moving into. In this school, we will be talking about James Rosnev, one of the writers, an American political scientist and international affairs scholar. He served as president of the International Studies Association from 84 to 85. His scholarship and teaching focused on the dynamics of world politics and the overlap between domestic and foreign affairs. He is well written. He's got very good books like Turbulence in World Politics, A Theory of Change and Continuity, Along the Domestic Foreign Frontier, Exploring Governance in a Turbulent World, and then his book, Distant Proximities, Dynamics Beyond Globalization, is a completed trio on globalization. So if you see, he has contributed a lot. Now, what are the basic principles of Rosnev that we are trying to understand when we are trying to look at sociological liberalism? International relations is not just state-state relations. It is also transnational relations. There are relations between individuals, groups, organizations belonging to different countries. The emphasis on society, on many types of actors, is called pluralism. James Rosnev defines transnationalism as the process whereby international relations conducted by governments have been supplemented by relations among private individuals, groups and societies that can and do have important consequences for the course of events. The notion that relations between people are more cooperative and more supportive of peace than relations between national governments. Rosnev argues that individual transactions have important implications and consequences for global affairs. Citizens have become very important variables in this. The erosion and dispersion of state and government power. Individuals have greatly extended their activities because of better education and access to electronic media and communications as well as foreign travel. The world has become a global village, like Marshall McLuhan has told us. States' capacity for control and regulation is decreasing as ever more complex world. The consequence is a world better informed than more mobile individuals who are far less tied than before to their states. The crowding onto the global agenda of new interdependent issues has made more salient the process whereby global dynamics affect the welfare and pocketbooks of individuals. The revolution of information technology has made it possible for citizens and politicians literally to see the aggregation of micro actions into macro outcomes. Rosnev thus supports the liberal idea that an increasingly pluralist world characterized by transnational networks of individuals and groups will be more peaceful. Sociological liberalism, the second major thinker that we will be dealing with is Carl Wolfgang Juche. He was a social and political scientist from Prague, that is East Europe, Czechoslovakia. He was a Stanfield Professor of International Peace at Harvard University. From 1977 to 87, he was the director of the International Institute for Comparative Social Research at Berlin. His work focused on the study of war, peace, nationalism, cooperation, and communication. He is also well known for his interest in introducing quantitative methods and formal system analysis and model, and so better known in the 20th century. He speaks about, again, transnational relations. During the 1950s, Juche was a leading figure, and he as an associate attempted to measure the extent of communications and transactions between societies. Juche argues that a high degree of transnational ties between societies leads to peaceful relations that amount to more than the mere absence of war. It leads to a security community, a group of people which has become integrated. Integration means the sense of community has been achieved. People have come to agree that their conflicts and problems can be resolved without resort to large-scale physical violence. Such a security community has emerged among the Western countries in the non-Atlantic area. North Atlantic area. What are the conditions that make it conducive? First, increased social communication. Second, greater mobility of persons. Third, stronger economic ties. Fourth, a wider range of mutual human transactions. The third major thinker that we will be looking at is John Burton. John Weir Burton was an Australian public servant, High Commissioner and academic. Burton and the original Centre for the Analysis of Conflict was moved to the University of Kent at Canterbury in 1979, where he remained until 1981. He then moved to the University of South Carolina, where he was awarded an International Studies Association Fellowship. After a brief but productive period at the University of Maryland, Burton was persuaded to join George Mason University to help in the development of a new center of conflict analysis and resolution, now as known as the School of Conflict Analysis and Resolution, SCAR. Burton then retired to Australia, where he continued to write until his death in 2010. He brings in two important models for us. One is the billiard balls model and the other is the cobweb model. John Burton's model, cobweb, a world society with subnational and supranational levels of interaction. Cobwebs and billiard balls. The realist model argues that states are like billiard balls. This means that they are independent, self-contained units. This phrase was suggested by Arnold Wolfers, who was a prominent realist during the 1950s. John Burton, however, argued that transnational relations between people from different countries create new forms of society. These exist alongside or in competition with the system of states. He claimed that all nation states contain individuals and thereby have contacts and interests with external groups such as religious groups, business groups, and labor groups. Burton argued that we should map actual patterns of communication and transaction between people, groups, organizations around the world. This way, we would get a much more accurate account of what is happening in the world because we would be mapping actual human behavior. Burton famously argued that if we do this, then we would end up with a cobweb of dense transnational interactions. We do not get the simple billiard ball model that realism wants us to see. Diffusion of power towards the micro level. Maurice Naim, a Venezuelan journalist and writer, he is a distinguished fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. In 2013, the British magazine Prospect listed Naim as one of the world's leading thinkers. In 2014 and 2015, Dr. Naim was ranked of the top 100 influential global thought leaders, and in his book, The End of Power, was also selected as the first book for the followers of Mark Zuckerberg's 2015 book club to read. Naim served as the editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy magazine for 14 years. Since 2012, he has directed and hosted Effecto Naim, a weekly educational televised news program on economy and international affairs that airs throughout the Americas. In 2011, he received the Ortega Y Gasset Award for important contribution to journalism in the Spanish language. He is the former Minister of Trade and Industry for Venezuela and the Executive Director of the World Bank. He talks about what we call the rise of micropowers. The conventional holders of political, military and corporate macro structures of power are increasingly being undermined and challenged by micropowers. Insurgents, fringe political groups, innovative startups, hackers, loosely organized activists, upstart media, outlets, leaderless young people in city squares and charismatic individuals who seem to have come from nowhere are shaking up the old order. There are three revolutions according to him. The rise of micropower is due to three revolutions. The More revolution. More people are living healthier lives and makes them more difficult to be regimented and to be controlled. Second, the mobility revolution implies that people are able to move around a lot more than earlier. They cross borders, they communicate globally, they easily switch loyalties of any kind. Third, the mentality revolution concerns this aspiration of the rapidly growing middle class all around the world. They shake off traditional values, take nothing for granted, and they do not easily defer to authorities. Sociological liberalism has one more thinker that we should be consider. If you see, to a large extent, Professor Emeritus of Politics, world politics, he says, is no longer just international relations. It is an evolving set of multi-level, multi-nodal structures and processes, a heterarchy cutting across hierarchy and anarchy, dominated by special interest relations between public and private policy making processes, structured by different economic sectors as well as complex regimes and extra-state authorities. States in this context are becoming what is called reactive states. So state transformation, according to him, is he underlines the many ways in which the domestic and the international is being challenged, leading to a transformation of and not the disappearance of the state. With COVID-19, this is a very important thing because there is a transformation of the state. Its absorption into transnational webs of politics and power and the reconstruction of the notion of statehood itself along multi-level, multimodal lines. The key driving force in this transformation and reconstruction will be transnationally linked groups of political actors engaging in cross-cutting competition and coalition, building behavior, exploiting the growing institutional loopholes of global politics, constructing new power games, creating new networks, and changing the people's perceptions of how world politics works, changing the parameters and dynamics of who gets and should get what, when, and how. Four major scenarios. Whereas these processes will eventually lead remains uncertain. Outlines four different major scenarios, ranging from rosy and cooperative towards hegemonic and more conflict prone. Now, if we see the summary of the school of sociological liberalism, international relations is also a study of relations between private groups, individuals, and societies. Overlapping interdependent relations between are bound to be more cooperative than relations between states because states are exclusive, and according to sociological liberalism, their interests do not overlap and cross-cut. The world with a large number of transnational networks will be more useful. With this, we finish the first school. In the next lecture, we'll go to the other three schools of neoliberalism, which is also equally important. Thank you so much.